Have you ever, like, felt you're missing something really crucial about the people around you?
Hmm.
Like, maybe you're just judging them on the surface
Hmm.
and you're completely blind to what actually gives their life meaning.
Yeah, or maybe, you feel kind of stuck yourself, a
Oh,
bit like you're on autopilot.
right. And struggling to build the kind of life you actually want, even though you mean well.
Those feelings are, well, they're incredibly common. That sense of disconnection or struggling with motivation, searching for something
Mm.
more.
Yeah.
It turns out wrestling with how we see others and ourselves is just a really fundamental part of being human.
And what's wild is that sometimes the sharpest insights into these like really deep human problems, they don't come from the latest thing you see online or some shiny new book.
No, not all.
They actually come from thinkers who were grappling with the exact same stuff over a century ago.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And today, we're digging into one of the greats.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are taking a deep dive into selections from William James's talks to teachers on psychology and to students on some of life's ideals.
Right. So this book, it actually grew out of lectures James gave. He was this, huge figure in psychology.
Towering, really.
Yeah, and he was talking to teachers, to students. He wasn't just spinning theories. He was really exploring how understanding the mind actually applies.
Applies to what, though?
Well, to guiding other people, for one, and also, crucially, to living a more fulfilling life ourselves.
Okay, so our mission today, it's pretty simple. We want to pull out the most surprising, the most practical, the most powerful ideas from James's talks.
A shortcut.
Exactly. A shortcut past maybe some of the dense academic language to get right to the core wisdom,
Yeah.
about the mind, learning, habits.
And that big one, what makes life feel significant.
Yeah. And this deep dive, it's tailored just for you, our listener, whoever you are, whatever you might be wrestling with right now.
Okay, let's jump right in then. James kind of kicks things off by setting the stage for teachers. He says, look, psychology is studying how the mind works. That's a science.
Right.
But teaching, that's an art.
Okay, and that distinction feels really important.
It is. Because he's saying psychology doesn't just hand you a paint-by-numbers guide for the classroom.
Right. No magic formula.
Exactly. It doesn't spit out immediate methods.
Yeah.
The teacher, the inventive artist, they have to take that scientific understanding and figure out how to apply it creatively.
Okay, so it's like knowing physics doesn't make you a musician.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But understanding the physics of sound, that can help you understand why certain techniques work, maybe why others just fall flat. James says psychology helps teachers know what not to do.
Ah, okay. So it narrows the field.
It narrows the path for experimenting, yeah.
Yeah.
And it builds confidence because you kind of get the theory behind what you're trying.
He has this great phrase saying psychology gives the teacher a stereoscopic view of the pupil.
Stereoscopic view. Okay, what does he mean by that?
Well, he says you need your gut feeling, right? Your intuition, that tact and sympathetic, concrete observation.
The human touch.
Yeah, he calls that the absolute heart of the art.
But you also need the analytic side, the ability to kind of step back and understand the mechanics underneath it all.
The curious inner elements of his mental machine. Love that phrase.
Yeah. So it's combining that intuitive feel with the psychological insight. That's the sweet spot.
And he says, look, the good news is you don't need to swallow the whole field of psychology.
Oh, thank goodness.
Right. Just grasping the most general, the most fundamental principles, that's enough to be super helpful.
Okay, so what's one of those big principles then?
Well, James talks about what he calls a biological conception of the mind. And this is where it gets, like, surprisingly modern.
Biological conception.
Okay, he's saying the mind isn't just some abstract thing floating around thinking deep thoughts.
Right.
It's a practical organ. It was given to us to help us adapt, to survive in the world.
Okay, so it's for practical use. That makes sense.
Yeah. And so if you're a teacher, or really anyone guiding people, your main goal, James argues, is to train people to behavior.
Behavior.
Yeah.
Not just sitting still, I see.
No, behavior in the widest sense, like reacting effectively, appropriately to whatever situations life throws at them.
Huh. So education, from his perspective, it's all about organizing useful, what did he call them? Acquired habits of conduct.
And tendencies to behavior, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like right now, you could say our education is showing up in how we're talking and listening here.
Totally. You're
Yeah.
processing, I'm explaining. It's trained behavior in action.
And he really pushes teachers to see everything that's going on with their students' thoughts, feelings, impulses. See it all through the lens of how it shapes their future actions. It's all connected to building that capacity for, like, effective behavior out in the world.
This leads right into one of his most practical and honestly often overlooked ideas, the maxim,
Yeah.
no reception without reaction.
No impression without correlative expression.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that one. It's
Yeah.
powerful.
It's huge because it means just like hearing something or seeing something. That's not enough for it to stick, not really learned.
So an impression that doesn't lead to some kind of action, some change in behavior, it's kind of incomplete, wasted even.
Physiologically incomplete, he says. Yeah, basically wasted. It's the action, the motor consequences that really clinch it in your mind.
Okay, so even things like old school recitation.
Yeah, which we might kind of dismiss now as just parrot-like.
Right.
He points out that had this principle baked in. Just reading is weak. Saying it back, that helps fix it.
But it's not just about talking, right? He expands on that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Modern teaching gets this, he says, by using writing, drawing, building things, manual training.
Manual training. He is big on that, wasn't he?
Yeah, he really championed it. Said it gives people a better balance, a more practical sense, again, always linking the mental stuff to physical action and adapting to the world.
And that feedback loop matters too.
Yeah.
What he called the return wave of impression.
Right. Knowing the results of your action, getting feedback on your essay, seeing your drawing actually look like something.
Or even just noticing how someone reacts to what you did.
Yeah, that's all part of the complete learning experience. And kids, he says, they naturally want that. Crave it, even.
Makes sense. It teaches you the consequences, helps you adjust for next time.
Okay, so where do these acquired behaviors, these habits, actually start?
Well, they have to build on something, right?
Yeah.
They graft onto or maybe replace our native inborn tendencies, our instincts and impulses.
Okay, so kids aren't blank slates.
Definitely not. They come pre-wired with certain drives. Things like fear.
Which he calls powerful, but yeah, used sparingly.
Right. And love that bond between teacher and student. Super critical. And curiosity.
Curiosity. That's interesting. He breaks that down, right?
Yeah, like the raw sort of sensational pull of bright things, loud noises for young kids. And then the more intellectual kind, being interested in how things connect logically. He notes it's stronger when you're young.
So you got to grab onto that early curiosity with like hands-on stuff, object lessons, manual training.
Exactly. Capitalize on it. He also mentions imitation. Kids are like little sponges.
Imitative animals par excellence, he calls them.
Yeah. And emulation or rivalry. Competition.
Ooh, rivalry. That feels a bit controversial now, maybe.
Well, yeah, modern education sometimes shies away from it. But James calls it the very nerve of human society. He points out how deep that drive is not wanting to feel like left out or weird.
So maybe it's about using it wisely, like competing against your own past self.
Could be part of the art, yeah. And this connects to something really critical for anyone involved in development, not just teachers.
What's that?
The law of transitoriness.
Oh, right. The idea that impulses kind of flare up and then fade.
Exactly. Many interests and impulses are super intense for a specific period, but if you don't act on them, they just fizzle out. Think about learning to creep or walk or build things or even do math.
There are windows of opportunity?
Yeah, they possess the child at certain times. And that, James says, is the proper pedagogic moment. Miss that window when the native drive is strongest.
And trying to train that skill later is way harder.
Maybe even impossible, because the built-in interest is just gone. So, his advice, don't delay. Seize the moment.
So the teacher's job starts with recognizing these native tendencies, working with them.
Right. Introduce new stuff, but make sure the student gets to experience the results, the consequences of their actions.
So that memory and association start guiding them, not just immediate feelings.
And he adds, always respect those original reactions. Even if you're trying to guide someone to change, start by understanding where they're actually coming from.
Okay, so building on this idea of trained behavior, motor consequences, James puts a ton of weight on something we maybe kind of brush off today, habit.
Oh yeah, habit is huge for him. He uses that great physical analogy. The nervous system literally grows into the way you use it.
Like creased paper or a coat falling into folds.
Exactly, it becomes second nature.
And his point is that education's prime concern, like its main job, is installing the most useful habits.
Because habits are, what did he say, the stuff of which behavior consists.
Yeah. And they're actually liberating.
How so?
Well, the more routine stuff you can make automatic through habit.
The more your higher level thinking is freed up.
Exactly. Your creativity, your willpower, it's
Right.
free for harder problems.
Yeah.
The opposite is that miserable human being he talks about, just paralyzed by indecision because nothing's automatic except being uncertain.
Wow, okay. So how do we form good habits then? He quotes Professor Bain, right?
Yeah, with these really practical maxims. First, launch yourself with strong momentum. Really commit. Give it everything you've got at the start.
Okay, strong start, got it. What's next?
Second, and this one's the killer, never allow a single exception, not one slip up, until that new habit is really truly locked in.
Oof. That's tough, like winding a ball of string, he says. One slip undoes a lot.
Exactly. Consistency is just absolutely critical. No wiggle room at first.
Okay, third.
Seize the first possible opportunity to act on your resolution. Don't just think about it. Don't just feel good about deciding.
You do it.
Do it immediately. That physical action, the motor effect, that's what helps weld the intention into your brain. Avoid being the nerveless sentimentalist and dreamer.
Right. Don't just dream about being virtuous, actually do the virtuous thing. Which leads to the fourth point.
Yeah, basically. Don't just preach abstract stuff.
Huh?
Lie in wait for real, concrete chances to practice those virtues.
Like the Darwin example he uses. Regretting losing his love for poetry because he just stopped reading it.
Yeah, it's quite poignant. Capacities just wither away if you don't use them. Exercise matters. He urges teachers to tell older students this straight up.
Because ultimately, James believes habits aren't just about what you do. They shape who you are. They fashion your character.
That line is chilling. The hell to be endured hereafter is no worse than the hell we make for ourselves in this world by habitually fashioning our characters in the wrong way.
Whoa. Heavy.
Yeah. He wants young people especially to realize how fast they become just walking bundles of habits.
And it's not just physical habits, right? Thinking follows habits too.
Totally. The association of ideas. Our thoughts and feelings also run in habitual tracks.
Consciousness is like a stream, he says.
Yeah.
And ideas link up either because we experience them together
Contigu.
or because they're somehow similar.
Similarity, right?
So your character is also formed by your habitual form of associations, your typical thought patterns.
Which means a teacher's job includes trying to break bad mental links and build good ones, guiding those tendencies.
It's hard to predict where a thought train is going next, but you can usually trace it back.
Yeah.
And the key thing is, interest and attention can steer that stream.
Yeah, they can deflect it. Which leads to a practical tip for teachers. Multiply the cues. Don't just teach or test something one way. Use different examples, ask different questions, approach it from various angles. Make lots of connections. Because the association isn't just A to B, it depends on the whole context, the total constellation.
Okay, that makes sense. And speaking of attention, he connects that directly to interest, right? Calls interest the natural sequel to instincts.
Exactly. Some things just grab us naturally: bright colors, loud sounds, things related to survival. Those are native interests. But most things become interesting only through association, by getting linked to something that is already natively interesting.
And what's the most natively interesting thing of all?
Yourself, your own life, your own well-being, your own fortunes.
Ah, right. Like a random book might be okay, but make it your book and suddenly it's fascinating.
Or tedious work details become absorbing because they affect your job, your paycheck. His classic example is the railroad timetable.
Dull as dishwater. Unless it's your trip. Then every detail matters.
Exactly. So he says, all later interests are borrowed from original ones. They're built by clever association.
And the difference between a great teacher and a boring one is often their knack for making those connections.
Their inventiveness in mediating these associations, yeah? Can they link the dry subject matter to something the student already cares about? That's the trick.
And this ties into attention. He talks about passive attention.
Where the subject is just so cool, it pulls you along naturally, develops its own interesting connections. He kind of links that to genius.
Okay. And then there's voluntary attention.
Right, the effortful kind, where you have to keep dragging your mind back, like forcing yourself to study something boring.
And he points out that lots of successful everyday people, maybe like business people dealing with dull data, have incredibly strong voluntary attention.
Yeah, so the teacher's goal should be to elicit interest whenever possible. Use concrete examples, connect to existing interests.
Make it easier for passive attention to kick in.
Right, rather than just yelling, pay attention all the time.
But he doesn't want things to be too easy, right?
No, definitely not. He says voluntary attention is crucial too. Learning to push through stuff that's initially difficult or unpleasant but necessary for a long-term goal, that's vital mental training. He's not about making pedagogy totally soft.
So it's a balance. Elicit interest where you can, but also train that muscle of voluntary attention for when things get tough.
Exactly. Strategic effort. Okay, moving on to memory and how we acquire concepts. James makes a point that still resonates today. While your basic, raw ability to retain stuff might be kind of fixed.
Your memory for systems of knowledge can definitely improve,
How?
mainly by building logical associations. Like science helps because it gives you frameworks. You learn a law, you don't have to memorize a million separate facts.
I gotcha. And verbal material, words, become super important for abstract thought, especially after adolescence.
Right. And he stresses using multiple channels, talk about it, write it, draw it, have the students do the same, hit multiple senses.
He also mentions that finding by Ebbinghaus about forgetting being really fast right at the beginning.
Yeah, the forgetting curve. Steep drop off, then it levels out.
But here's a really key insight from James, I think, that goes beyond just tricks for memorizing.
What's that?
He says your raw memory score, that's not actually the main thing driving human efficiency in real life.
Okay, so what is?
Passion, interest, will, those factors often count for way more than just how much stuff you can recall on demand.
Huh. So be patient with students who maybe don't test well.
Exactly. Life's a much longer exam, he says. He gives these amazing examples, like a blind man who understood bee behavior better than sighted people just from descriptions, or a man with no limbs who was an adventurous traveler.
Wow. So total efficiency is about how everything works together, driven by that interest and passion.
Precisely. He also sketches out a kind of rough timeline for learning different types of concepts.
Okay, like what?
Early childhood, say up to 7 or 8, is all about sensible properties, learning through touching objects, playing, building things, getting familiar with the physical world.
Makes sense. Hands-on learning.
Then adolescence is the prime time for abstract stuff, science, math, cause and effect.
Okay.
After that, more complex societal and moral concepts. And after adolescence, it really becomes about words, words, words. That's the main tool for thinking.
But he warns teachers.
Right.
Make sure the kids understand the meaning behind the words.
Yes, crucial, not just parroting back phrases they don't grasp.
Which connects to apperception, how our minds take in new information by fitting it into what's already there, our existing ideas, memories, interests.
We instinctively try to make the new fit the old, the law of economy. Like his example of a kid seeing snow for the first time and calling it sugar because it's white.
Right, assimilating the new to the known.
And he has this kind of blunt term for the downside of that as we get older. Old fogeyism.
Huh. Old fogyism. Meaning what?
The increasing difficulty most people have in grasping entirely new types of ideas or concepts after a certain age, maybe like 25 for many.
Ouch.
Yeah. He argues you need to build lots of different mental categories, heads of classification, early on to keep your mind flexible later.
That's kind of sobering for educators, isn't it? The categories they introduce now could shape how well someone learns completely new things decades later.
Totally. Okay, final bit in this classroom section, the power of will.
Willpower, okay.
He says voluntary actions aren't just impulses. They involve having a clear idea and making a deliberate fiat, a conscious choice to act. It's a complex mix of drives and holding back, inhibitions.
And he talks about different kinds of struggles with will.
Yeah, like the precipitate will, just acting on impulse, maybe like a maniac, he says, versus the obstructed will, wrestling with conflicting ideas, maybe being overly scrupulous.
And voluntary attention, that effortful focus that comes in when things are complex and ideas are competing in your head.
Exactly. And he mentions this delicate inhibitive machinery in the mind.
Delicate inhibitive machinery.
Yeah, where even a tiny, faint, contradictory thought can sometimes stop a really strong impulse dead in its tracks. Think about how a little flicker of doubt can halt a big plan.
Huh. Complex stuff going on in there.
Definitely. And he suggests that maybe, just maybe, in this complex interplay, especially in how long we can sustain that voluntary attention, that's where the possibility of free will might still exist, even with all the biology and habits.
Interesting. So not fully determined.
He leaves the door open, and he wraps up this section saying, if you understand the student as this complex, little sensitive, impulsive, associative, and reactive organism, partly fated and partly free.
We just get them better. You have deeper insight.
Yeah. And then he adds, combine that intelligence with love. That makes the perfect teacher.
Wow. Okay, it's a lot on the teaching and learning side. Let's shift gears now. How does he apply this psychology more broadly to life itself, starting with the gospel of relaxation?
Right. So now he's looking at specifically American mental habits. He saw Americans back then as being way too tense, too high-strung, over-intense.
Where too much expression was his phrase, like living with all your reserves constantly engaged.
Exactly. He contrasts it with a kind of British reserve, suggesting Americans were just burning nervous energy unnecessarily.
And he brings back his theory of emotion here, right? The Lange-James theory.
Yeah, the idea that feelings follow the body's expression. You don't just feel sad and then cry, you start crying, and the feeling of sadness deepens because of the physical act.
So the practical takeaway is you can control your feelings by controlling your actions.
To a degree, yes. Act cheerful, and you'll actually start to feel more cheerful. Suppress the outward signs of anger, clenching fists, scowling, and the anger itself might lessen.
So if you've lost your natural cheerfulness, you can kind of fake it till you make it.
That's the sovereign voluntary path back, he says. Sit up cheerfully, look around cheerfully, act and speak as if cheerfulness were already there. Let your body lead your mind.
And physical tension, like clenched muscles or shallow breathing, that fuels worry.
Big time. He argues that learning to relax physically isn't just about feeling good. It makes you more efficient, saner, more serene. It gives you moral elasticity. He even quotes Spinoza on the self-satisfaction, acquiescentia incipso, that comes from a well-trained, relaxed state.
So how do we do it? Part of it is planning carefully, but then letting go during the action.
Yeah, don't overthink the execution. Trust a bit of spontaneity. Avoid that constant reflection and worry about the outcome while you're doing something. Like a bicycle chain, he says, if it's pulled too tight, it doesn't work well.
Okay, and for worry specifically, he had a sovereign cure.
He did, and it's profound, though maybe not for everyone. For him, it was rooted in religious faith. It was about entrusting the outcome to a higher power.
Like the Brother Lawrence example.
Yeah.
The monk doing mundane tasks.
Exactly. Finding total peace, just doing little things out of love for God, completely free from anxiety about how they turn out because he trusted God with the results.
That idea of trusting and letting go, it connects really nicely to the next section, doesn't it? One of his most famous essays on a certain blindness in human beings.
Oh, absolutely. This gets right to the core of why we so often misunderstand and, frankly, misjudge each other.
His core argument is that what gives things worth isn't objective facts, it's how they feel to the person experiencing them.
Precisely. Each person's inner life, their duties, joys, struggles, it's a vital secret to everyone else. We just can't access it directly.
And our common stupidity and injustice in judging others comes from missing that inner feeling.
Yeah. He says the truer side is the side that feels the more.
He gives that really powerful personal example about the mountainside clearings in Carolina.
Oh, yeah, it's so moving. He looked at them and just saw ugliness, destruction, denudation.
But then he realized, for the pioneers who actually made those clearings,
they were filled with intense positive feelings, symbols of personal victory, honest sweat, a whole peen of duty, struggle, and success. He'd been completely blind to their inner reality, their peculiar ideality.
wow. And the boyhood lantern example, too.
Right. To anyone else, just a cheap lantern, maybe annoying, but to him, the boner. It was this golden chamber at the heart of his life, pure bliss.
He quotes Robert Louis Stevenson, saying, life's important bits are spun from seeking for a joy and finding it. We don't live in some objective world.
No, we live inside the warm, phantasmagoric chamber of his brain. To miss someone else's inner joy, their sense of value, is to miss all.
And he warns that educated people can be especially prone to this blindness.
Yeah, the highly educated classes. We can get so caught up in abstractions, theories, looking down from on high.
That we totally miss the simple, basic goods and joys that give meaning to ordinary people's lives.
So what's the fix? How do we cure this blindness?
He suggests sometimes we need to kind of descend to a more basic, more sensorial level. Hardship can do it, or just being purely immersed in nature without analyzing everything.
Like that W.H. Hudson story from Patagonia, spending hours just observing.
Yeah, doing seemingly nothing, but feeling intensely significant inside, while an outsider would just see wasted time.
So the big takeaway is humility, really. You just cannot judge the meaning or worth of someone else's life from the outside.
Right. Don't assume you know what makes them tick, what feels important to them. Respect that their values come from feelings you can't directly access.
And recognizing this hidden inner life, this secret significance, leads right into his final exploration. What makes a life significant?
Okay, so building on that blindness idea, understanding that others have this private world of feeling, That's important practically too, right? Like his Jack and Jill example.
Yeah, Jack needs to appreciate Jill's perceived importance, even if it's just subjective to her. But then he goes further. He talks about visiting Chautauqua.
Ah, yes, the sort of utopian community.
Hmm.
Peaceful, cultured, no real hardship. Like paradise.
Right. But instead of feeling great there, he felt kind of flat, like a dead level of every mediocrity.
Because it was missing something.
Yeah, it lacked strength and strenuousness, intensity and danger.
Huh. So, paradoxically, we actually need struggle to feel life is significant.
It seems so. He realized we need the sight of the struggle going on. Just passively enjoying the benefits of civilization felt ignoble to him. It's the effort, the sweat, overcoming difficulty that gives life moral style.
And he worried that civilization could become too comfortable, too easy, a mere Chautauqua assembly.
Exactly. Devoid of that essential struggle, which is why he felt such deep sympathy for heroism in common life.
Like wherever a scythe, an axe, a pick, or a shovel is wielded. Seeing heroism in ordinary hard work and endurance.
Yes. That unidealized heroic life. He really connected with that. He mentions Tolstoy too, right?
Yeah, Tolstoy's reverence for the simple faith of laboring people. How they accept hardship without rebellion, find meaning in endurance, see the good in life without getting vain about it.
But James pushes back a little on Tolstoy, doesn't he? He questions if the context doesn't matter at all.
Right. Is courage shown by an illiterate laborer in a simple struggle truly equal in significance to courage shown by an educated person in a complex, far-reaching situation? It's a tricky question.
So what's James's final take on significance? It's not just the inner feeling.
No, that can just be sentimentalism.
And it's not just the external difficulty or labor.
Right, that could just be painful drudgery.
For a life to seem significant, especially to others, to have that depth and solid character, it's the combination.
Combination of what?
Inner ideals, the values, the goals a person holds, combined with their active virtues in pursuing them. Things like courage, effort, endurance, especially when facing challenges.
Okay, so it's ideals plus action, ideals plus struggle. That's what gives life weight and significance in his view.
Yeah, and seeing that blend ideals and active virtues in other people, even in the most ordinary lives, that's what cultivates really important qualities in us.
Like humility, tolerance.
Reverence, love, and this deep inner joyfulness at the increased importance of our common life. You start seeing the depth everywhere.
But the sad thing is, people often miss this. They focus on superficial stuff.
Totally. The sad irony, he says, is people chase external markers, wealth, status, and remain kind of isolated in their own subjective worlds, missing the significance all around them.
So the hope is learning to see others differently. Subspecie aeternatus.
Under the aspect of eternity, yeah. Recognizing that profound inner drama, that mix of ideals and struggle playing out in every single human life, that breeds tolerance and the wisdom to just live and let live.
Wow. Okay, what a journey. From the real nuts and bolts of training the mind habits, reactions, associations, all the way to these incredibly deep, moving ideas about seeing past our blindness and finding what truly makes life significant.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. His ideas on habit alone, I mean, that's like a lifetime's worth of practical self-improvement right there.
Definitely.
And his call to look beyond the surface, to see that hidden meaning in others. Gosh, that feels more relevant than ever in our often shallow world.
It absolutely makes you stop and think about your own habits, doesn't it? Both the automatic behaviors you're training your nervous system for and the kind of mental connections your mind makes by default.
For sure. And it really forces you to question how you're judging the people you interact with every single day. Are you seeing the clearing or just the stumps?
Are you seeing the lantern or just a bit of tin?
Right. So let's leave you, our listener, with a thought. Pulling together James's psychology and his thoughts on life. If a teacher's fundamental job is training pupils for behavior and giving them essential conceptions, how does that connect, maybe inherently, to cultivating this deeper sense of significance in them? How can educators, or really any mentor, help someone see that golden chamber in their own life?
And also recognize the blend of ideals and struggle in the lives of others around them.
It's a big question.
It is. And maybe more personally, taking James's call to action seriously. What's one small step, just one, that you can take this week to deliberately try and look past that certain blindness he described? Yeah. To try and glimpse the hidden significance, that peculiar ideality in a person or a situation that seems totally ordinary, maybe even boring or annoying on the surface.
Something to chew on. Thanks for diving deep with us today.